I was getting sexually abused for a couple of years as a child. This lasted for about 3 years. Men specifically, when they get sexually abused in their teens, will usually go on to have certain kinds of sexual proclivities like that, where they find themselves being involved with men sexually, even though they have virtually no romantic interest with men. In the case of me, touch without express intent to turn this into sex is something that is like non-existent in the West. I have a female client who every time I work on her, I will start working on her right trap and I'll say, "Did you get in a fight with your boyfriend?" And she goes, "Yes."
Back in bold. Buenos dias from Bogota. It's a beautiful day. I got a little haircut. They took off all my hair. You know, it's shaping out pretty decent. I love getting cuts in South America, man. They give you professional, amazing service. Usually like $5 to $10. Oh my God. The best part, every single one of them, they put this little vibrator thing on their hand, and for like 5 minutes after your haircut, they go zzz and massage you, your shoulders, your head, and you leave there. Beautiful experience, you know. So today we're gonna get into a little massage talk too. We got a holistic type of dude, Andrew Briggs. We're talking on the Twitter X, and we're trying to like, okay, how do we outline this? I just did a health podcast with the Logan Detox dudes. It was very good. Maybe it'll be released by the time this one's out. For sure it will be. And we're talking, and you're talking about sexual trauma, and I'm like, okay, you know, I think only if you get raped or, you know, molested, you know, you have the trauma. But then I started getting into it. I'm like, nah, the Freudian stuff, like everyone struggles from some sort of, you know, sexual, you know, crap. So I'm like, damn, let's get into this. You're also from Colorado. You're living in Colorado. I spent 2 years there. We have a lot to talk about, Mr. Briggs. Kind of, you know, give us a background first, you know, who you are, why we should even listen to you, et cetera, et cetera.
So I've actually been in the holistic health space for over a decade now. I've been a personal trainer for about 12 years. Massage therapy was a more recent addition, and then nutrition coaching got mixed into there somewhere as well. But you know, I've kind of worked across the board as far as clientele go. The sexual assault thing was something that I would say came up in my mid-20s, even though I was aware of it through my entire childhood. It was something that I was in denial of, and not just in denial of it happening, but denial of how it affected me. And in my experience, specifically men, not only does this seem to be something that happens a lot more than probably anybody realizes, but it's something that never gets talked about. And if it does, it usually kind of gets pushed down as this like, oh, whoa, like we don't like discussing this. We're not going to talk about it. Like a lot of people will hush it down really quick. As far as sexual abuse, rape, being molested, all those different things, obviously anything I say should be caveated with talk to a mental health professional about this. Ultimately, I'm just a person sharing my story. But this is a huge thing that isn't just simply this happened and it's done now. It impacts you mentally, it impacts you physically, it impacts you in so many ways. I don't think that we have even begun to understand.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes I think about what if, you know, in my childhood, I'm blocking some experience and this is why I lived this unique life, and it's hard for me to keep a monogamous type relationship. So hopefully I didn't get diddled and touched when I was young, but you never know. You never freaking know. So hold on. So you had suppression of this, and how did it come out? The sexual trauma. I mean, and what are we talking about? Did you get raped, molested? Like, you want to get into it quick?
Yeah, so I was getting sexually abused for a couple of years as a child. This lasted for about 3 years. It was by a neighbor who was a couple of years older than me, significantly bigger than me. Like, you know, now I'm a pretty big dude. But at the time, I mean, I was thin as a rail, absolutely no muscle on me. I had didn't have a relationship with my dad, so I didn't really understand like I guess how to fight back, how to defend yourself and stuff. So it was very much at this childhood. It was kind of like, okay, this is happening. Just let it happen and you won't get hurt kind of deal. I was raised in a,
is this an adult or a teenager on young kid thing or what?
It's an older teenager. I was 10 when it started. But so basically it was a picture pre-puberty and then to the tail end of puberty. And, even that was something that I really struggled with because I was like, well, we were both kids. And I actually had a therapist who After talking with him for a while, he was like, Andrew, do you realize what a 10-year-old looks like? And I'm like, yeah, I know what a 10-year-old looks like. And then a couple days later, I go home. I'm talking to my, or I'm home with my family for Thanksgiving, and I see my nephew, and he's about 10 years old. And I look at him and I'm like, there's no fucking way that kid could defend themselves against somebody. And I think that's something that that's kind of like one of those little mental gymnastics that people play with themselves. Is they always think of themselves as they are now. They don't necessarily think of who they were. I don't think of myself as any different as a 10-year-old as I do now at 31. I still feel like me, but because of that, I looked at I look at who I am now. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds, and I'm like, well, why didn't I just fight back? And it's like, well, you couldn't. There was no way. And yeah, so I kept that down until I was 25. Also because I was raised in a very religious household, um, and that was something that he had actually used uh, as kind of a way to keep me quiet. Was like, God is going to hate you, your family's going to hate you, your friends are all going to think you're gay, this, and that. So it was kind of this very systematic um, way to kind of suppress what had happened and to make sure that I didn't say anything. And then that ended up leading to years of my life being really, really confused about my sexuality, thinking, okay, like, am I gay? Am I bi? Am I this? Am I that? And I would say I refer to myself as straight, and I would say that's more true than it is not. But it's definitely something that kind of blurs that line for you. Off camera, you and I were discussing a lot of Freudian things. There's something called repetition compulsion, where it's you will act out your trauma to a degree, and that was something that happened for years. Was me trying to understand this and being involved with men, and not even necessarily in like a positive way, but just doing it, being like, why am I doing this? This doesn't make me feel good. This doesn't make me happy. I feel fucking miserable every single time this happens. So it's very strange the way that it impacts people. And I will say, men, when it comes to heterosexuality or otherwise as well, I think it kind of adds an extra layer of complexity to it.
Hold on, this dude, I mean, he sounds like Machiavellian or trying to keep you in your place, but I mean, he's a teenager, right? Too. So like, on his end, I'm trying to understand, was a power dynamic, or why is the dude even doing it? Maybe he's curious about his sexuality, or like the teen on teen thing. Usually you hear about the adults and the little kid. You don't
Yeah,
really hear about this kind of that dynamic. You want to dive a little more deep into it, and then after this, I want to really relate it back to the everyday person, right? Because a lot of people can't relate to this,
right.
or maybe they're suppressing it. But yeah, I just find that interesting. Like this teenager dude, doing it to not an adult.
Yeah. So that was actually a big part of forgiving him, was realizing that the way that he was doing it, the way that he was, uh, I'll use this term loosely, the way that he was kind of controlling my perception and how I felt about talking about it, it was so um, meticulous. There's no way that it was just something he figured out as a child. It's almost surely something that he learned. There's a stat out there that shows the majority of people who were sexually abused as a child never go on to repeat that abuse, but almost in a confusing sort of way, the majority of people who are sexually abused, or excuse me, the majority of people who are acting out this abuse on other people were sexually abused as a child. So there is essentially this very, very small number of people who are doing the majority of sexual abuse to others. And the majority of the people who have experienced it never go on to do it. So it's this weird inversion that starts to happen. So I know that what he was doing to me almost surely happened to him. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is they only look at their assaulter, their attacker, as just this evil person, which what they did is terrible, right? There's like no getting, there's no excusing what happened. But it's a big part for me personally, and what I do think is a big part of it for everybody, is being able to look at that person and say, almost surely this person is a victim of what they're doing to you. And in this fucked up way, it's probably them trying to understand that trauma as well, and you're just the unfortunate recipient of this horrible thing, right? I think being able to look at your enemy, so to speak, and being able to humanize them as also being a victim changes things. But yeah, the stuff he was doing to me, man, like, you don't you don't just figure that out from being a kid, from being a teenager. You figure it out from somebody else doing it to you.
Yeah, another point I was going to bring up too. This is a lot of times said by the very religious or hardcore conservative, is that a lot of gay people, and you were talking about it, like they believe that they were touched as kids, so that's why they keep doing it. And you said you were experimenting with the men, and
Mhm.
then but you hated it about yourself. Now I'm not saying gay people don't exist and they all got touched at all,
Right.
but is this prevalent in this community a lot or what?
Yeah. So I'm actually about to release a 3.5 hour long podcast that's all about men's mental health. It took me 400 or 500 hours of research to get through all of it, to script it all. I've got a ton of different people who've had similar experiences speaking up, and we're doing everything from suicide, depression, sexual abuse, all these different topics. And one of the things that did come up quite a bit was there is, and this is something that you kind of got to tiptoe. This is something a lot of people don't like to talk about because they hear this and they go, okay, that means homosexuality is just a mental disorder. I do not think it is. I think that's insane to say personally. But there is some pretty undeniable evidence that men specifically, when they get sexually abused in their teens, will usually go on to have certain kinds of sexual proclivities like that, where they find themselves being involved with men sexually, even though they have virtually no romantic interest with men. In the case of me, I had never had a moment where I was like, oh, like I want to date men, but it was just, this was something that came up, right? So when people hear that, they go, okay, if there's a cause, then there is a solution. And they almost look at homosexuality, bisexuality, whatever it may be, as something that can almost be therapied out of you. And I will say, again, only in my experience, as I've gotten older, as I did more therapy, as I uh, went through various healing modalities, it did taper down quite a bit. I would say probably a 90%, if not near 100% reduction in those things. But a lot of people hear that and they go, "Oh my gosh, conversion therapy. That's the secret." And it's like, no, dude, not at all. Like that's horrible. So I think it's a tough line, and it's something that every individual who's experienced this, it's something that they're going to need to look into for themselves. Is like, okay, did I feel these feelings at all beforehand? Does it go up? Does it go down? How do I feel about those experiences? And really kind of going inward. And this, as cliche as it might be, a lot of people kind of poo poo journaling and reflection. I personally think it's incredible for you. That's where you really see what's coming up for you mentally, is just posing a question to yourself and saying, okay, do I feel, bisexual, gay, queer in any kind of way? And really being able to dive in on that with yourself and really see if any of that feels true to you. And it might, and it might not. But that, I think, is also something else that a lot of people struggle with. Is they go, me personally, I'll actually speak from personal experience on this. And I know that it did apply to several of the other men that I've spoken to about this. Is if they do find themselves feeling gay or bi or whatever, they go, well, I wouldn't have been this way if he hadn't done this. And it becomes this almost internal self disgust, right? Where they go, I'm broken now, or I've been changed, or I have this permanent mark on myself because of how this person impacted my mind.
Yeah, you see that a lot with like the hardcore Christians who, are speaking out against gays, but behind closed doors are doing the crazy stuff, right? Yeah.
Always.
But my whole thing, I don't like it pushed on kids, but I also
Oh, yeah.
understand if a kid is like confused when he's young and is like, I don't like girls at all. It's good for them to have the resources, but kids are so malleable. And today it's ridiculous what they try to like push onto the children and whatnot. Um, I spent a lot of time in Thailand and Brazil, two of the biggest, gay communities, LGBTQ, all that kind of stuff. And so I've learned a lot more about it. And I also, I've studied a lot of Roman history. Back in the day, it was totally normal for like a mentor to be doing it with the young kid. They even said Caesar was the bottom for the king in the Antolia. what kingdom was that? So
Was it
like this was like
Anatoly?
the Greeks were doing it all the time, the
Yeah.
Romans. So I think it's definitely a complicated subject for sure. But being pushed on kids and whatnot is the point where I'm like, okay, this is getting a little wild for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's there. There needs to be a really, really hard line in how we are with children. Like it's again, I know it's like a political topic to be like, oh, like should we be able to show kids this kind of stuff? And it's like, I don't personally know what the right answer is. I know when I have kids, it's not necessarily something that I would want them exposed to, not because I think it's going to like change them or break them or make them wrong in any kind of way, but to say that kids cannot be um, influenced in any kind of way, I think is just a denial of reality. One of the interesting things about the Greeks, because it gets referenced a lot as like this, this is normal, blah, 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 blah. If you look a little bit deeper into how it was perceived socially, there was specifically a little bit of cultural shame around men who were the bottom, oddly enough, almost because it's seen
Feminine.
as like, yeah, exactly, yeah, it's like giving up power. You're taking the feminine role,
Mhm.
which is probably a giant rabbit hole completely on its own. Is like, okay, well, why do we have an issue with um feminine men or men in feminine roles? And there's even been women that I've spoken to where it's like they'll be dating a straight man and he's very effeminate for whatever reason, and they're like, yeah, it just like kills the attraction for me. I
Especially where
don't
you're
think
living in Denver. There's a lot of them out there.
yes, yeah, there are like no kidding. But yeah, there's a happy medium. There's a fine line for pretty much everything. And um, as far, just to touch back on go back to the kid subject. I do think kids are getting used as almost like a tool from both sides, really. As stupid as that is to say, it's always a both sides thing. But like kids are kind of being used as a tool to argue the ethics of sexuality, and I think that's something that's really, really terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you control the youth, you control the future. But
Oh yeah,
good stuff so far, but we need to relate this back to the everyday person, okay? And I thought it was quite interesting when you brought this up. First of all, I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, what does this have to do, But then I started thinking, no, wait a second, the Freud and so forth. For me personally, like I live a very unique life, and I've had many beautiful relationships, but it's like it's never enough. How cliche that sounds, but also like it's like I need something new, crazy, like unique, and
novelty.
yeah. And then some people say too, like, oh, you're trying to make yourself feel better, that your ego, or like that you're worthy. Is this a form of sexual trauma, or kind of get into like how every person suffers from a degree of sexual trauma?
Yeah, it's so I do want to caveat this with if anybody listening doesn't feel like they are a victim of sexual trauma, do not heed any of this. One of the things that I saw happen to a friend was them basically explain a weird sexual example, or excuse me, a weird sexual experience that they had, and a bunch of their friends then being like, yeah, you got raped, you got raped, you got raped. He never perceived it as that. He just perceived it as a weird sexual experience with a girl that made him kind of uncomfortable. So I also do want to be just careful to say, like, if you do not perceive something that happened to you as sexual assault, do not change your mind to think that it is, because that will, I promise, do way more harm than it will good. But as far as how it affects other people, again, I'm not a psychologist, but it's almost undeniable to say that there doesn't become some kind of overcompensation that starts to happen from someone who has experienced sexual trauma. And like you, Nick, specifically, may I ask how old you are?
I look young, don't
You do.
I? 28.
28. Hell yeah, man. Yeah. So I would say, me personally, it kind of started to taper off around 27 was where I started to kind of like reel things in. But there was this long period of time, and you see this with a lot of people where they get into extreme sexual acts, or they're always chasing a new partner or a better number, almost like there is going to be some kind of value of manhood between another partner's legs, So they're always like searching and searching and searching. It's like, okay, I'm going to fuck one more person. I'm going to fuck one more person. I'm going to, get one more body. And then I'm going to feel like a man. Then I'm going to feel good. Then I'm going to feel worthy enough. And all my friends are going to see me and, oh my gosh, this guy gets so many girls, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, ultimately, what does that really do for you? Beyond you go, okay, I can get a girl, or okay, I can get a guy, or whatever, whatever you're into. But um, people will use that almost as a coping mechanism to go, yes, this terrible thing happened, but look at what a man I am. Look at how easy this is for me. Look at how many people I can get. Being able to, I think, being able to step away from that personally uh, is kind of a step in healing that trauma, because this isn't going to be for everybody. But when you really look at chasing that, what are you really chasing but a kind of a pseudo version of what you experienced, right? So
The
it's
feeling, the adrenaline,
exactly,
the heart
exactly.
pumping. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, obviously, my life is, I've traveled the world in dangerous places. I'm a part-time professional athlete because that gives me the emotions. Like, I'm always searching for, the feelings of feeling alive, right? So, and here's where I push back on it. And I don't think I'm as crazy as I am. Of course, you get very hedonistic in this lifestyle, especially if you're living in places like Brazil. It's in the air, the sexual energy. But where I push back on, and this is like, the red pill guys and the stuff that's just blown up in the mainstream lately, is this was normal a lot of the times for men back in the day. The kings did impregnate hundreds of women,
Yeah.
so it's just not a biological imperative for me to want to spread my seed. Should I? That's where I kind of like, okay, wait, is this actually wrong, or is society shaming me for being
Hmm.
a lover? But I do agree, it comes to a point where for sure you feel disgusting if you have no emotion, in these acts and so forth. But even when I've had beautiful relationships, after a while you want to go back out in the jungle, and hunt and feel good and get that emotional high, and then go back to relaxation and normal.
Right.
Um, but I'm not disbarring that it could be from past sexual trauma or ego and emotional validation. I don't go one or the other.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that it is one or the other either. I would say it's more so a matter of what is the long term goal. So like me personally, I've wanted to be a dad since I was 10 years old. I'm now 31, so I'm 21 years late on this. Partially because of relationships that just didn't pan out. Um, I mean, ultimately, completely because of relationships that just didn't pan out. Sometimes it's how it goes, but that's something that's really important to me. So when I stack that up against the things that I was doing in my mid 20s, trying to sleep with as many people as possible, it's like, okay, is that congruent with the lifestyle that I want? So whenever people are doing these things, it's not bad. It's not wrong. It is wrong insofar as it is inconsistent with who you believe yourself to be or where you want to go. So, you, Nick, talk about yourself as a professional in your workspace, as a professional athlete. I assume you've got different kinds of goals that are not tied up in sleeping with a bunch of random people, correct? So, then if we look at it in that regard, you doing that is only as wrong as it is inconsistent with your goals. So, let's say your next thing is,
No, no, no. Oh, I mean, my
no, go ahead.
goal is to live life, and do the experiences, share beautiful moments with people. It's I don't view sleeping with women as like a goal. It's like the you're meeting on a beach, you go on an adventure together, the little romantic bubbles. Like there's nothing quite like the feminine energy, especially
Yeah.
when you're on the road with the different languages, cultures. Like it's a movie, right? We all watch
Yeah.
fantasy and romantic and all that, and those emotions are addicting, and they make you feel like you're living, and that's what I chase. I like to live, whether that be with the athletic stuff, or that be with traveling the world, learning new cultures, and whether that be with women.
Right. So let me clarify. When I'm saying you, I'm meaning more in the royal you sense. Anybody. I'm using you because we're talking right now. But when anybody has a goal that is incongruent with that, and that they've gone too far to an extreme. So if somebody, for example, is like, okay, this year, like, okay, I've been stuck at making X amount of, let's just say like 70 grand. I've been stuck at making $70,000 for the last 3 years. I really want this year to be the year that I make 100,000. I want to break six figures. And every single day, they're swiping through Tinder, they're DMing chicks on Instagram, they're going out meeting chicks and blah, 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 blah. And it consumes every single aspect of their life. It consumes every single moment. Then it's like, okay, this has gone from a fun thing where you're sharing energy, you're having experiences with people. It's now become a crutch for you that is detracting from the ultimate goal, right? So there are people who will take it to such a significant extreme because they need that validation. They're not getting it in their business because they're clearly not hitting that business related goal. They're not growing themselves physically, financially, whatever way that they want. But they go, you know what? I know that if I can sleep with this person, I'm going to feel good for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long, right?
Yeah, I like that. Something that just came to my mind. The sexualization of American culture, especially relating to the abundance of pornography. This is a form of sexual trauma for many people, especially kids who use this. No, when they're watching other people do it and crazy acts, and then they go down the rabbit hole, and it keeps getting worse and worse. Is this a deeper form of sexual trauma as well? Because if it is, then everyone has had sexual trauma, basically.
Yeah. So I guess what do you mean by kids specifically? Like what age group would we be talking
I
about?
mean, the kids start jerking it, really young, especially now. I mean, all these kids
Yeah.
got the smartphone when they're 6, 7 years old. I mean, it's freaking crazy.
Yeah, that's a weird one to think about because I remember my friend had a PSP, which a lot of people probably don't even know what that is. A PlayStation Portable. It was one of the few things that you could like download porn onto. And we would be sitting in what was called enrichment classes, basically like kind of a pseudo class where we just sit together and get our shit together for the day. And I remember one of my friends had a bunch of porn downloaded, and we had like a group of like 6 dudes just staring at it during class, and it was just like, oh my god. And I remember being in elementary school and finding a ripped up porn magazine on the side of the road. And this is before I had any idea of what this was. I mean, I had no idea what the difference between like a boy and a girl was beyond like external appearances. I didn't have any idea of what genitals were. And I remember seeing this porn magazine and rolling it up and putting it in my backpack and showing it to my friends at school and like tearing out pages for each of them, coming back home. And every single night I would take it out of my thing. I would look at it and I would just be like, I don't know what this is, but this is something, right? And my mom ended up finding it in my closet and I got in a shitload of trouble and I had no idea why. But I think it's undeniable to say that and possibly nothing but love toward my mother. But I think that and possibly my mother's reaction as you've just done something bad. I think it'd be naive to say that doesn't have some kind of impact. Like if children seeing people get murdered on the internet, something that hopefully nobody would have to see at a young age, is going to impact them. If playing, as the media likes to say, playing violent video games is going to impact these kids, you can't even begin to say that being exposed to sex and pornography and all these degenerate behaviors around it, you can't begin to say that that's not going to impact kids.
I've been on that no fap for 6+ years. Okay.
Fucking hell, dude.
Yeah. I was never like a
dude. No wonder you're chasing women in that way, bro. Your balls are probably swollen like basketballs.
It's got me in the sticky situations, no doubt. But pun intended.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind the pornography, I think in 20, 30 years will have like the same sort of science behind as when we used to prescribe smoking cigarettes. I think this stuff is damaging young people at an alarming rates, flooding the brain with dopamine, showing them things that is crazy. I wasn't like an addict or anything like that, just a normal kid, and so forth. But then I started seeing this stuff like, oh, if you stop jerking it and watching this, like, your life gets better. And
yep.
Yeah, it did. Awesome. I mean, it was amazing, the transformation benefits, but more so the discipline. Like if you cannot jerk your dick, like they'll go in the rest of your life. Like
quitting the ultimate biological drive.
Exactly. But so to me, I think if we talk about sexual trauma, I think a lot of dudes, young kids, and they get blasted with those pixels and seeing that crazy stuff is going to like shock them. You know what I mean? Like, just like you're looking at this, like, I don't know what it is, but I think I like it.
I remember thinking this is important and I couldn't explain it.
Yeah, and then mom shames you for it, and then you have the sexual shame, and I
Yep.
don't know. I think there's a lot of different sexual traumas out there, like especially like when you're young. Let's say you had your first experience and no one knew what they were doing, and and you're embarrassed, or and
Yep.
there's so many things that can manifest deeper into your everyday life from being in the most vulnerable position. That's what it is when you're sex and you're naked together, and that's vulnerability. And
Yep.
if something goes wrong there, it's gonna tweak some things going on in your head. No.
But yeah, you see it show up in interesting sorts of ways too with people where it's like, okay, they got sexually abused or they got, let's say like drugged or something and raped at a party. Well, why did that person, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but this is how I know some people have interpreted it. One of my friends who she's a gal, and she was very fit, very strong, very conventionally beautiful, and she got sexually abused, and because of that tried to make herself as unattractive as possible. So she gained as much weight as she could. um, she stopped, and people might hear this and I guess feel some type of way, some level of disgust toward it. But again, we all have different trauma responses, and people do what they do. But she stopped showering. She was rarely washing her clothing, and when she would go to bed at night, she would sleep with her clothing, including her shoes on, just in case she needed to run. And so it was this extreme overcompensation because of what she had experienced, where it's like, okay, anything that I can do to avoid all attraction, to avoid all attention, to essentially become a social ghost because people don't like the way that I look. But as a real quick change back to pornography, one paper, there's one paper that I'm aware of where it seems to be showing, and there may be more, so I'm not sure, but it seems in the case of pornography, for some people, your perception of pornography can influence your relationship to it pretty significantly. So you had said you weren't an addict to porn. I was, and I know pretty strongly that that came out of what happened to me as a kid, where I just did not have, to any degree, a healthy relationship with sex, and that included sexual adjacent things like pornography. So I was watching it all the time, like a couple times a day, and it got to the point where I was so desensitized I couldn't perform with my girlfriend and could not perform in real life, and that was possibly partially related to me taking like an antidepressant and a bunch of other medications as a kid with undiagnosed things because of what was happening to me. But um, there's people out there who can watch porn and be totally fine. There are people out there that will watch porn and become completely desensitized. So to not paint too broad brush, anybody hearing this who's like, well, you know what, I don't have an issue with porn. You might not, and that's fine. I don't still personally see the benefit in watching it. It's like I don't really see what you gain from watching it that you wouldn't gain from just experiencing it with a real person or being able to go through it in your head or whatever it may be. It's like the drawbacks are potentially infinite. The pros are you maybe nut a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I'm very libertarian, so people do what they want when they want, but
Absolutely.
I really push everyone. That stuff is devilish. There's
Yeah.
some weird stuff in the industry. You got to look into who pushes it and why they maybe
Dude,
push it. I
it gets
definitely
dark.
think, I definitely think it's actually going to become more important for one sector of the population that is becoming bigger and bigger, and that's dudes who are not getting laid. Right, it's happening in the West all over, where the
Mhm.
incels and these kind of dudes who are checking out of society. So I mean, we're gonna have to do the AI and have them put the mask on to get their needs met. Otherwise, they go crazy. This is the dudes that some of them start shooting up schools and whatnot. So maybe it becomes a form of placation, but if you're a normal dude or whatnot, you're being placated too by partaking in watching other dudes bang women. I mean, it's
Yes.
crazy to me.
Yeah. Like conceptually, what you're looking at is so strange. Like watching somebody do that, it's almost like it would be like watching somebody else make money. It just doesn't make sense. Like this is detracting from you doing the thing yourself. It's also you mentioned incels. Have you ever heard of gym cells by chance?
Are they dudes that just work out and then don't get laid?
Yeah. I did a video on this a couple months ago or something like that. It was a wild ride because it was like dudes who can't get laid or whatever, in incels, and they get that way for whatever reason. But incels who basically make their primary thing in life like, okay, I can't get XYZ, I can at least go to the gym. And it was actually a really, really interesting like subcategory of like people to go down. It was a really cool rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's productive. You
Yeah,
always see
exactly.
those kind of like off jack gym dudes that kind of like aren't socially calibrated. But yeah, I'm worried about that though because it's
Yeah.
happening like drastically in the West. If you go to Brazil, bro, you'll see just the dorkiest dudes with beautiful women. And I have my own theories on why this hypergamous, that's another red pill term,
Yeah,
is
hypergamy.
happening. Yeah, in Europe and in the United States, Western Europe for sure. But yeah, I don't subscribe to any sort of pornography or think there's any sort of benefit besides placating dudes that
Yeah.
hopefully don't check out. I did want to say the massage. We're going to talk about massages because this is a huge
Right.
point in my life. So I lack a lot of oxytocin. That's probably another reason why I chase women, to get that feeling of motherly love, cuddling
Yep.
and feeling good because I'm usually on my own, solo traveling, foreign countries, different languages, cultures, all that. So I've learned though that massages really help out with that, releasing the oxytocin. So a Thai massage. Oh my god, I love Thai massage, the Swedish massage. And I've also had friends that dabble in the Tantra and show
Hmm.
me some interesting things. And you're a
Yeah.
massage therapist,
Massage
correct?
therapist. Yeah. So I've been licensed for a couple years now. I have worked with everybody from working with world record athletes to pro bodybuilders to I've worked on my mother, and I've worked on gals that I've dated, and obviously just average clientele who just want to relax. And with each one of those intentions, you've got a significantly different kind of massage. For some people, it's they just want to move better. For some people, it's they're in immense amounts of pain. For some people, it's creating a more comfortable relationship with touch. And there has been a good number of people that I've worked on uh, where they've actually started crying on the table, and that's something that really throws people off the first time that it happens. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk that is basically about how the body stores emotion. So we get into different somatic therapies of trying to release trauma from the body. And again, rabbit hole all on its own. Some people dispute it. I think there seems to be a lot of validity in it because there will be people where you see, okay, this thing, like one of the things that comes up. I have a female client who every time I work on her, I will start working on her right trap and I'll say, "Did you get in a fight with your boyfriend?" And she goes, "Yes." And every single time I work on her, or not every single time, excuse me, the times that I'm working on her traps, I can feel significantly more on that right side. And it's gotten to the point now where she'll say, "You should probably just start on my right trap." And that's like my cue that they got in a fight recently. Um, but an interesting thing, really, really interesting experience that I've had is people have this idea of only men can be predators, only men can be sexually deviant. I have had a significant, huge amount of women who will try to push the boundaries during massage. And like when I really tell people about all these stories, how many times I've been propositioned by women, like don't get me wrong, it happens with dudes a lot too, but in a strange way, I I don't want to say like I expect it, but it's because of how we are in the society. I was more surprised to see that it happens with women to any degree and how often and how bold it is. Like I'm talking, it'll be something as simple as like I will have a woman start rubbing my thigh to I have had women rub my crotch. I have had women be like, "Hey, yada yada, like this is my husband. Like, how would you feel about like coming and hanging out with us sometime?" I mean, it gets really really bold, and for whatever reason, it seems to usually be older women, mid 30s to like 50s and stuff. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just finding that novelty, being bored in their lives or whatever. But it really really surprised me.
Uh, I had to thank God I don't have any weird sexual fetishes. Like, I think that would just be tough to, like, hey, I want you to sit on or poop on me, or put
Hmm.
your feet in my mouth. I'm pretty plain Jane, okay? So I don't
Right.
think I got too screwed up as a kid.
Good way to
But
be.
dude, the amount of women that want to get slapped, beat,
Yep.
I
Yep.
mean, choked. I've had to teach myself how to do this stuff because like they can't get off either way. And anytime like it's usually like, okay, hey, it was nice to meet you, but this is like, too much. I can't keep,
Yep.
going back to this, because obviously that is dealing with sexual trauma. If you need that amount of, crazy, to me, I mean, maybe it's healthy to some people,
It's
but
extreme stimulation where it's like,
yeah,
what could have happened that got you to this point? And that's something I think about with most fetishes, people who are like furries and stuff like that. Like in general, I try to be one of those, like, don't yuck somebody's yum. Like, as long as all parties are consenting, who cares what other people are doing? Like you said, I'm pretty libertarian about people's kinks and fetishes. But it does at least give me pause where I go, what happened to get here? How much of this is like innocent, silly little things, and how much of this is based in trauma? And the other thing with the people who end up preferring more intense and violent sexual acts, it's like that doesn't come without a risk. Like we've kind of seen what has happened where there is a miscommunication in sex, um, and it truly can be that simple, where people just miscommunicate during sex, and then now lawyers are involved. So it's like that kind of stuff. You do need to be, again, speaking broadly with the term you, like you got to be careful with that kind of stuff, because it's, even if somebody says like, I'm okay with XYZ, you are alone in a room with somebody. There's no probably no contract between you guys. Um, so anything that happens behind closed doors, you've got to be really confident in the trust that you have with that other person. That's one of the other reasons that I stopped being so I guess loosey goosey with who I was sleeping with, was because I was like, okay, if I don't really know this person, that means I don't really know if I can trust them. I don't really know their history. I don't know how they're going to respond to these things. And it gave me a lot more pause around that, because I was like, I don't know how this person will be 24 hours from now. If they're going to say, you know what, I know I said I was okay with that, but I'm not okay with it anymore. And yeah, I just kind of stopped taking the risk. My general litmus test is, would I trust this person at my home by themselves? And if the answer is no, then I should not sleep with them.
yeah. Anytime I go back to the States, I mean, it's got to be, I got to see text messages. Like, I'll even do a
Yeah.
voice memo, like, hey, please confirm this. It's bad over there now,
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
not blaming this person or that person, but you need to protect yourself at all costs if you're in the
Yeah.
United States right now.
And that
Um,
goes for the women too. Like, it's, sleeping with random people. You don't know who that person is really. Like, you might be into these really rough, intense things, and that's fine, but you don't really know if that person is trustworthy, and if they can, you know, measure the intensity at which they're going with you. And if things go beyond your comfort level, are you going to be comfortable enough with, let's be real, a stranger? Are you going to be comfortable enough to say, hey, that's too much, after they have just struck you?
Yeah, before we go back to the massage stuff, my
Mhm.
last point on this, there's a book. I think it's called Red Letters. Maybe it was in the 70s or 80s, I believe, in England. And it was a bunch of anonymous letters sent in to this publisher or whatnot about these women, their sexual fantasies. And this is, still not super, liberation, type, well, kind of hippie area, I
Right.
guess. But, and the book is insane. The stuff that a lot of women's desires, and maybe a lot of them won't admit
Yep.
it, are more extreme than men.
Yeah.
I've never tried or thought about doing some of these things that I read, and the more you talk to women, they open up with you. They'll tell
Yep.
you, like, they're not, I'm not going to say deviant, but they're sexually, just as crazy as a lot of men.
Yeah. There's another book. I think it's called like a thousand wicked thoughts or something like that. And it's kind of in that similar vein, where it's like people just kind of being open about all the different sexual desires that they have and stuff. But yeah, sorry, you were saying you wanted to get back to massage stuff.
Yeah, to me, I think we're gonna get back to it, but the dudes they grow up believing, like, okay, a princess. You know what I mean? Like, you
Mhm.
you you view a woman as like a flower, and I think when you start realizing this could be sexual trauma. when the woman asked the man to slap him or punch him in the bedroom. I mean, to me, I was like, whoa, like I'm a good boy, like I think that's a form of sexual trauma. But to the massage stuff, yes, dude, like I've had so many massages, especially in Thailand. I'm talking $5 massages from some 70-year-old, Thai grandma that is stronger than any man I've ever met. The way they twist you and turn your body, and you go to the massage and you're literally floating. It feels like you're in the clouds. The massage is ridiculously powerful. And the biggest thing I've noticed, a good massage or a bad massage, is if you can feel when the masseuse is like into it. You know what I mean? Not just doing the job. When they're actually putting their energy in there, and those are the massages where you can like feel like, okay, there's some transferring things going on here. There's some hippie, stuff.
Yep. Yeah. So that's where you're kind of getting into that like pseudo Reiki stuff where people are doing energy work, and I'm kind of wishy-washy with it. I think there's probably more truth to it than there is not. I think people have probably gone a little bit overboard. There are some people where they'll do Reiki or energetic massage, and they'll just hover their hands above you for an hour in different positions. And it's like, okay, I just paid you to like hang out while I lay flat on a table. Don't know too much about that. But as a thing to, you talking about like get the 70-year-old Asian woman, the hardest massage that you will ever receive is from an old Asian woman. And the hardest massage I have ever personally had to give, again, I have worked on pro bodybuilders, I have worked on professional powerlifters. The hardest massage that I've ever given was to an old Asian woman. They can just handle pressure like nobody's fucking business, bro. Like just absolutely getting in there. And they're like, you can go harder. You can go harder. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if I can go harder. Like it's just wild. But yeah, there is a lot about people getting stuck in their routine with massage therapy where it just becomes like, okay, I know that I do this, then I do that, then I do that, then I flip them, then I do that, then I do that, and we're done. And I think it's a good idea to have kind of a rough, how would I put this? Like you have kind of a template that you use, but you use that to be exploratory with how you're going to get through the massage. So it's in the beginning when I'm working on people, I'm going through and figuring out what's not moving well, what feels tight, what feels like we can get a lot of movement out of it right now versus what feels like it's not going to respond well to touch. And it really does allow you to be more intelligent and more, as you put it, like in the massage, being able to work with that person and their biology and their body is by doing a really detailed either intake as a questionnaire for some people or doing a really detailed assessment in feeling how their body's moving.
Interesting. Get into Tantra for me. Can you? More of the sexual massage that has been going on for, thousands of years, because it's obviously taboo in the West.
Yeah, I don't know why it's taboo personally. It's kind of tough for me to touch on it because it was something that I was looking into, God, like 10 years ago. I think when I very first kind of started getting interested in massage, that was when I got like my very first massage was like, okay, like what else is there to this? But I think being able to have touch without express intent to turn this into sex is something that is like non-existent in the West, where it is basically like, okay, I'm interacting with, this person on a date. The end goal is we're going to have sex. And like, again, not that there's anything wrong with that. Maybe that is the goal and that's fine. But I had a female friend where she had actually mentioned she couldn't remember the last time her husband had touched her in a non-sexual way. And you've kind of talked about some of the red pill stuff. That's something that I think red pill gets relatively correct, is that being able to still understand that you can't just go like bam, 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 just formulaically get there. Like this is a person that you need to be able to romantically and non-sexually engage with to really open them up. And I mean, like it's you see that so clearly in like the people who just completely skip over all foreplay, and then it's the sexual experience is like very meh because you didn't really create that open energy with them. Does that kind of make sense?
See, sometimes I'm a selfish lover though, so maybe that's a
Yeah,
sexual
that's how it
trauma.
goes sometimes. We all are sometimes.
But wait, hold on. What does this have to do with tantra? We're talking about the touching the
Wait. So what?
non
I guess here you define tantra for me because maybe I'm taking it somewhere different than you.
a more sexual massage, releasing the sexual energy. You know, like the barely touching your skin. Sometimes get
Yeah.
the goosebumps.
Yeah. So
Uh,
that's
the I can't remember
again like that's it's something that people turn into. So the very very light touch where you'll give goosebumps to people sometimes. I had that
basically
explained.
moving sexual energy around, like
Yeah.
clearing
Yeah.
pathways and that kind of stuff. No.
Yeah, so it's if we relate that to people who will sometimes cry on the table, the assumption that could be made is that there is trauma or some kind of sexual discomfort there, right? Um, but I had the very very light touch described to me as a feather touch or feather stroke, and it is interesting because there is a lot of taboo around these like very very soft, um, kind of pseudo sexual, I suppose I'd put it, massage that isn't necessarily sexual for sure. You know, it's not like matter of factly sexual. So like hands are treated as a very sexual thing because think about it. Who are you going to interlace fingers and hold hands with? Or the inside of the thigh where the adductors are. That's another spot that a lot of people get really, really scared of. Working on people's pecs. There's a lot of taboo around that. But there's something about as a massage therapist being able to work on those areas and them know that it is a safe thing for them to happen. It's without getting too froofy, there's something really beautiful about being able to do that, being able to work on somebody and them know that it is a completely safe space and know that there's no risk of anything beyond this kind, caring, loving touch. I had a massage partner in massage school years ago, and he said he's working on me, and he goes, "Man, can I tell you something kind of funny?" I go, "Yeah, what's that?" And he goes, I've realized that when I give a massage, if I pretend it's somebody that I'm in love with, I give a way better one. And I was like, dude, I feel you. Cause like you can't put your hands on somebody in this way without caring to a degree. And whether that's caring about them romantically, sexually, or just as a person that you want to help, there's so much that goes into the intention of touch. And I guess again, being able to use touch in a non-sexual way, I think it's something that we have completely lost in this world.
I got a question. So I've been
Hit me.
meditating for a long time, since I was 11 years now,
Mhm.
and I've gotten a crap ton of massages. So like when I'm on the massage table, I can basically get in a trance and let go of every tension and whatnot. Like masseuses love massaging me because I'm so free and not all built up. What percentage of people is that for you? Like how many are like just free on the table, or a lot of
Mm.
them tied up and scared of the touch?
Percentage, that'd be a tough one, but I can say there's usually a type that you see. Usually the more rigid people, we'll call this like the boss babes or the high performer dudes. Those are the ones that are usually a little bit worse at giving up control because look at their life, look at how it manifests. They're always in control. They're always holding things. They're always working in certain ways. They've always got this very they've always got that rigidity and it physically manifests on their body as they are stiff, right? But then you look at these people who are very happy, hippie, flowy, yada, yada. I mean, I've never looked at one of those people and been like, oh, you're going to be a tough massage. It's like, I know the people who are very in touch with themselves, very in touch with, uh, you know, all these different, I guess we'll say more natural or holistic roots in themselves. They tend to be significantly easier, but there is also something to the fact that I am a man. I'm very clearly a man. Like I have a fucking beard. I'm 6'3". I'm 200 pounds. I'm not like a tiny, fluffy little dude, you know? So there will be times where a guy will come in and he goes, shit, this guy looks like me. And there's a little bit that kind of peaks up in their head that just makes them kind of stiffen up. And there's been times where I have like had to make a joke about it, where a guy will just not let go. He'll just be stiff the entire time. And I'll just be working on him and I'll be like, this is very rare, but I'll be like, hey, don't worry, buddy. This is all that's happening. And they'll kind of laugh about it and then they'll let go. But it's like there's in a lot of people this discomfort about being touched by another man. And in a very circuitous way, that was something that began to help me is when I got my first massage from a guy. And I said, oh shit, I can be touched by a man and it's not dangerous.
That's interesting though, because from my experience and from a lot of stereotypes, a lot of like high powered CEO type of dudes are the ones that are getting dominatrix
Yep.
and whatnot. With a woman, it's always the doctors, the lawyers, the boss babes that are little girls in the bedroom. You know,
Right.
they take off their masks because, you know, during the day they're working so hard, and then they want to just be you know, a little girl and a woman.
Yep.
So that's interesting that in the massage room they're still all ippity and
Think
tight. So
about
hold
the
on, does this
intention
say
they come in
something?
with.
Does
Oh,
this
can
say
you?
something? Does this say something about a person if they can just be let go in the massage room? Like, does that means they're healthy and everything is good, or no?
I don't know if it necessarily says something, but one thing I do want to say is that keep in mind the intention of why they're coming in, though. Um, like if somebody's coming in with that intention, but it's something they're uncomfortable with, that's still a hurdle that they've got to get over. But if you look at different God, what is it, like the big four, the big five personality traits? Um, Trait openness is a big one, and you'll see certain people where you can just kind of see how they wear that. They're not someone who is traditionally like an open person, and again, that's probably showing up in different kinds of areas of their life. So if I take this down a political rabbit hole, trait openness is usually less common in conservative people, and you can kind of get a vibe for like what someone's politics are after you know talk with them, or do a good intake with them, and then you're working on them for an hour. You kind of start to figure out a little bit about who they are. And these people who lack trait openness, usually conservatives, um, are a little bit slower to give up control because requires it requires that, you know, it requires you to give up control, and it's not something that they're usually used to, and that shows up in a lot of different ways politically for them probably.
That's very interesting. Like I said, I'm on my own a lot, the solo traveling, so I control, you know, most of my day, most of where I go, and I don't answer to no one. You know, like when I'm in the team sports, obviously, but you're in a leader role as a quarterback. But
Mm.
I can easily, through the meditation, probably get in a trance and let go for a masseuse. So
That
that
is a
is
learned skill, by the way. You just reminded me of something. That's a learned skill that you have done. You have actually taught yourself to let that go. There will be
okay.
times where I'm working on people and I have to say, "Hey, take a breath," or I'll have them intentionally stiffen up as much as they can because you force that stiffness and then let go. I mean, anybody listening right now, tense up your entire body for like 10 seconds, as much as you can, and then just let go, and you will feel more relaxed. So sometimes it takes that cue, but you have learned that skill, obviously.
Hi, buddy. Hey, we got a good hour in here. We could talk for a lot
Yeah.
longer, but
I was gonna say I do got a client in a little bit.
yeah, give me 5 practical things for the everyday person to get over, whether it's sexual trauma or have a healthier life. Because your main thing is, you know, like health and whatnot.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So my
5 things that we can do today if I really wanted to.
I'm gonna start off with an obscure one. Start out with an elimination diet. You need to learn how foods actually affect you. I know that doesn't seem like it's connected, but it does because your gut health is related to your mental health. There are certain foods that will kind of get you a little bit more wired, and I don't mean wired like coffee, but it will just kind of, you know, put you in that fight or flight a little bit just because your body doesn't handle it well. Being able to find out what kind of foods trigger you as a unique person with a unique diet and unique needs is the key. You can literally Google elimination diet and it'll come up. Or um, I believe I have a video about this somewhere. But that is going to be probably number one. Two, get into journaling. Everybody should journal. Even if you say, "Hey, I don't like journaling," you can literally start out with, "I do not like journaling. Andrew said that I should do this." Andrew's probably a fucking idiot. Andrew doesn't know what he's talking about, but you know what? I'm going to do this anyway. Just do that for 5 minutes and just see what comes up. I think you'd be shocked. Um, Three, try to look at the root cause. Um, Four, stop bashing your parents. I realize that our parents inflict us with their traumas and their struggles. Um, I can't remember the exact quote, but there's a quote out there that it's like, to have children is to know that you will fail. Like you will, you will harm your children. It's just how it is. So, um, as we grow up and eventually have kids, we're going to fuck them up the same way that our parents fucked us up. Being able to forgive them and know that they're imperfect is probably another big one in there. I believe that's four. And then, five. If you're open to therapy, do it. If you're a man, I personally say that you should have a male therapist because men communicate differently than women do. And psychotherapy is something that is completely dominated by women. A lot of the guidelines are written by female psychotherapists. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we've got female treatment that men are being treated by, and men generally tend to not communicate through just talking. Men generally tend to communicate through solutions, right? And if you're not open to that, I'm almost certain that you can probably find somebody who does psychedelic therapy. And I cannot recommend that highly enough. That was probably an 80% reduction in my symptoms personally, was my very first psychedelic therapy experience.
What, shrooms?
I did MDMA actually.
Okay.
Yeah, which was, it's not a traditional
That's helping a
psycho.
lot of veterans, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah. Yeah. PTSD, MDMA is an incredible one for that. But again, be careful. Don't just take medicines and blast off in your room by yourself. Please seek a professional to do this with, because you don't know what's going to come up. And if something comes up that you need help with, you do not want to be alone.
Yeah, all good points. I don't believe in therapy. This is my therapy,
okay.
podcasting.
But yeah, dude.
I will say this. I'm lucky to have a very important person in my life that I can talk to about anything and everything, who is very smart. So that is like my therapy. If I didn't have someone like that, oh, of course, you go pay someone to talk and open things. And maybe it is good to have a totally neutral, opposite perspective. You know what I mean? But therapy is very, don't go to the therapist, the shrinks.
It's nuance and everything.
There is a lot of crap in that industry, though. You know,
oh, yeah.
I think a lot of them sell fish oil, and but to communicate
snake oil
problems and to talk,
Snake oil.
Snake oil is better.
You're good.
To communicate your problems and hear you say it and get some decent advice is a great thing. But I'm lucky I do a podcast, and I'm lucky to have someone I can talk to. So
yeah, definitely. And it's you gotta find the I treat everything like a grocery store, therapy included in that. Don't just jump into therapy because everyone says to. If something is not good there, leave it. Find something that is.
Awesome. All right, buddy. Where can everyone find you? Okay, if they want some massage advice, health advice, sexual trauma advice, how do they reach out to you?
So you can find me on most social medias, Real Andrew Briggs, REAL Andrew Briggs. Okay. You can find me on YouTube under Holistic Motion. I'm going through a rebrand right now. So presently my website, I had a former business partner that I was with. Website was pridefitness.us. If it's that presently, but it's going to be holisticmotion.com. So yeah. Also my client just got here. You got any closing thoughts for me?
No, buddy. Hey, great to meet you.
Hey, brother. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, man.
Ciao.
And then I have a podcast as well, Holistic Motion. Go find me there, guys.
Hi, buddy. Enjoy.
Cheers, bro. Later.
Live bold, everyone.